Parliament has elected committee chairpersons which are split between the Government of National Unity parties. Rise Mzansi was accommodated as well with a position of SCOPA Chairperson. Samkele Maseko sits down for an interview with ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula to discuss a range of issues affecting government. I would imagine, Samkele, that there is a lot to discuss. I'm sure the Government of National Unity, its formation and model particularly, will be top of that conversation.
Indeed, Unati, the Government of National Unity has been formulated by various political formations within those 9 parties, which is 50% of the parties in the 18 that are represented in the National Assembly. 9 of those are in the Government of National Unity, and with 7 of those within the executive of the country. As you saw, other political formations like Rise Mzansi taking the position of SCOPA Chairperson through its president, Songezo Ziba. I'm going to bring in the Secretary General of the party of the ANC. That would be Fikile Mbalula, who is largely the one who is the custodian of the National Assembly as the Secretary General of the ANC at Luthuli House. Mr. Mbalula, rather interesting composition of chairpersons of portfolio committees. How did those particular negotiations come about, knowing that Helen Ziller had said that they are having issues, and you being a stumbling block as Luthuli House when it comes to the chairpersons of portfolio committees in Parliament?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us. We have agreed on a model of a GNU with characteristics of confidence and supply, which means that you will have agreement with political parties in relation to what must happen in the legislature, and working with them in the legislature as well, not only in the executive. So in this particular instance, we have adopted that particular model. It's uncharted waters, and is the first time of its kind that some of the committees will go to the opposition to respect the will of the people. And in this particular instance is that where we are not in charge, political parties will take over, and that means some are also serving in the executive. They don't have the numbers to serve the executive in the executive and also serve in the committee, so they've got to double up. So it's in the main, the ANC and the DA and the Patriotic Alliance who've got and the IFP, bigger numbers, and others it is 3-3-2-2-1-1 seat. But we are happy that we found each other. We are happy with the outcome. It's not always smooth that you agree with those that you are negotiating with on everything.
How were these negotiations, particularly knowing some of the backlash you received, particularly with not understanding the statement of intent? How difficult were these negotiations, not only of the executive, but also of the formation of the portfolio committee chairpersons?
The engagement with parties first is defined by a set of principles that inform your approach in terms of engagement. And what are those set of principles? Are principles, foundational principles: agree on stability, agree on constitutionalism, agree on the rule of law, agree on redress. Those are the things that we agree with, that bind us together, irrespective of ideological background. A minimum program in terms of what we want to do to achieve the result of governing the country and govern it well in terms of good governance. And we found each other with a majority of the parties in the National Assembly. And as the leading party, which got most votes, albeit with reduced majority, we were happy to talk to everyone. And others chose not to engage, but lay down their own red lines that they will not come to the party. So negotiations in their very nature are very difficult. We did not have to negotiate our prerogatives, that we stand for Palestine, others stand for what? We stand for land redistribution and all of that, others don't. We did not have to negotiate that. We just have had to look at what binds us together, which means that the GNU in itself is not a melting pot. It doesn't mean when you actually participate within the GNU, you then compromise your independence, your ideological outlook, and what you stand for. So it's a question of what is good for your party in this instance. If you believe that working within the GNU at the executive level, it's your choice. It's your strategic choice. It's your tactical choice that you actually make. And then it is said to be seen going forward. We will hold things together. But we understand that we participate here to serve our people. And the people first is important. And lastly, it was to look into the national interest of the country, that we are South Africans. And we as South Africa believe in a democratic process and multipartyism and constitutional democracy. And therefore, we didn't have external people to come here and force us into the table. We did it our own way and our own South African way. And bloodless, election results accepted within record time, government is up and running.
Was there ever a point in time you as the ANC felt as if there was too much interference by those who are perceived as the owners of the means of production? I'm speaking about those who effectively control the South African economy. There's
been an over-exaggeration about capital and those who control the means of production. It has been a political and ideological abuse, in a sense. Because we in the ANC, we understand our engagement with capital is unity and struggle of the opposite. There are things we agree with capital on. We want to create jobs. It is not the public sector's primary role to create jobs. You've got to do that working with the private sector. We've got to have social compacts with the private sector. So we need capital for the development of our nation and the creation of jobs. There are things that we don't agree with them about in relation to things that impact on our sovereignty and all of that. We don't agree on things that affect maybe labor and the worker rights and all of that. So ours is unity and struggle of the opposite. So the over-ideological perspective that changes us into a communist party or a socialist party is incorrect when it comes to the ANC. It's correct for those who believe that they are anti-capital and they believe in the destruction of capital for the creation of a socialist republic. We've got them right in the ANC alliance broader, which is the Communist Party. So when the Communist Party expresses its own perspective and ideological view in relation to what must happen to capital, it doesn't shock us. We've got shock absorbers over time in relation to those matters. And then for all other political parties, we believe that let us not just confine ourselves into hollow ideological perspectives that are not sustainable, whereas the people have spoken. And they've spoken in the manner in which they have. And they did not give us outright majority, all of us. So we needed to come to the table and talk about what needs to happen for this great nation of ours.
But why choose to work with the Democratic Alliance as opposed to a party that you are of the same ideological inclination, which is the former Youth League leaders and now leading the Economic Freedom Fighters? Why not work with the EFF but choose to form a broader government of national unity when you and the EFF and the MK party combined have over 66% that is needed to amend the constitution, for instance, to change Section 25 of the constitution, which is a resolution of your own conference?
If the EFF still want to work with the ANC in relation to certain issues in terms of the National Assembly, we are ready to amend and to engage on. Let's not confine ourselves to a corner where in which we simply define one model. We have looked at 5 models as the ANC before we arrived at this decision. First was a grand coalition, one party with many parties you work with. And then the second was a minority government with elements of supply and confidence. You create minority government, you agree with other parties to work in the legislatures in terms of them holding sway and accountability to the governing minority government in the legislatures. That is the second. And then the third is GNU, which is a government of national unity. You bring all parties and then you form government. And then you define that formation of government through a statement of intent. And the other one is to rerun the election. After 14 days, you don't agree, you go back. And the last one is to be backbenching. We would have been the biggest opposition party in the world if we chose to go back to the benches, because 6 million people said, we don't want you in the backbenches, we want you to govern. And then if you can't find each other in terms of govern, you've got an option to rerun. Unfortunately, we found each other. Now, it would have been an easy thing that you can work with all these parties that you talk about. We came with these models, and then we eliminated and came with the GNU. Those parties then said they don't want to participate in the GNU, and then that is it. So we had to move on because that is our position. So it's not a question of one party, absorbing another and all of that. It's a question of coming together of political parties to form government and run government. It has happened before in our country. It's a new model which is happening outside the model of the transitional constitution. But it is the political will of political parties to come together and work together for the people's interest.
Why
not narrowly serving, your own party and so on, and leave all others outside. So we don't do that. So we chose this path, and we believe this path will work for South Africa.
Why didn't you choose a rerun, particularly knowing that you had been hammered in a province like KwaZulu-Natal, which ultimately is the main reason you've dipped under 50%? Because if there was no MK party, you would arguably be sitting at 52, 53%, because 14% of your votes went to this particular formation that was formed about 3 months before an election.
Yes, it is like an easy decision to make about let's just go to a rerun and then we're back to the trenches and then fighting on. There's no guarantee that from where you have dipped, you will not dip further. Equally, there is no guarantee that you could do better and even do better than where you were. So both sides of the coin could actually mean a disaster for you. So when you look at models, you don't only look at models and scenarios, you look at risks. So each one of them carried the risks. But the most important one, which is the GNU, it meant that you work with everybody in the interest of the people. GNU was embraced by all South Africans, leave alone those who want to define ideological volatility and narrowly that they are left than left itself. The majority of South Africans across embraced GNU. And we believe out of GNU ourselves, we will survive because it begins to teach us a new terrain, uncharted waters, but organizationally. It begins to communicate a message that power is not permanent, and therefore it's not a given. You work for it. If you are a revolutionary party, remain a revolutionary party with all the ingredients of a revolutionary party. Don't become a fly-by-night and think that it is a given that people will vote for you all the material times. You've got to work and work for power and work to respect the people who put you into power. And the ANC will survive because the ANC is a revolutionary party. And for all what it stands for, it has learned better from local government elections, 46% to 40%. Now that we are now on the doorstep, we don't have to change the gear. Do the right things that we said we must do in relation to renewal. It's not negotiable. We now know where are the wrong apples in our party, where they were and all of that, and some of them have left in majority. But some of them will come back because they are not they've rehabilitated themselves in the process. They'll become better people when they come back. But the incorrigible will not. They will go where they belong. So there's no longer theory now. We know what we're dealing with. We have passed the era of the election, and this is the result.
Dr. Gamadlayise John Hlophe, you voted in the ANC in support for him to be part of the Judicial Services Commission, yet you're the very same party in the last parliament that voted for his impeachment. Double standards?
I wouldn't say that those are double standards with regard to Judge Hlophe. The ANC holds no brief for Hlophe, Dr. Hlophe, first and foremost, and or any member of any other party. And the discontent about John Hlophe's nomination is valid. And the ANC position on the JSC discussion in the House was not to say there is no basis. There is no basis for concern. If we were to vote, we will vote for him to go out, but there was no vote and there was no division. What our chief whip said in word was to say that the rules in terms of eligibility of a member to stand are moot when it comes to an individual who's impeached. And that is why we talk about Section 47. That must then be looked at in terms of addressing that question, because where the rules are now are simply addressing the insolvency of an individual. But it doesn't say that if you are somewhere, you have exercised this particular part, you have played this part, and therefore you cannot be part on this other side. So it is on the shoulders of the parliamentarians themselves and the GNU partners to rectify this thing, and not to stand out and not do something about it. It will be an indictment if this were to be allowed. A man or a woman who was a judge and impeached and found to be on the wrong, he must now sit in a panel and judge others and question them. It is morally bankrupt and incorrect. Must be corrected by the same parliament. So our chief whip, in word, like I said, raised the issue that when it comes to impeachment, it is moot. He did not say that we agree that Hlophe must be in the bench. That will be incorrect because we discussed that with them in Parliament. I had a discussion with them, and then I said that for us it's very clear that we were part of the parties that impeached Hlophe. We can never then be the first ones who agree that it is right for him to serve.
So then what do you then do now?
Because Hlophe will not be in Parliament as an MP if we did not impeach him. He will simply be there in the bench. And that is why when he speaks himself, he says, I no longer want that title. I'm a doctor, I'm qualified. Whatever doctor he is a doctor, and that is it, he's an MP. But we've got to deal with this lacuna in relation to our statutes in Parliament, where in which we have now been visited by the Hlophe phenomenon right inside Parliament. We need to deal with that.
What steps are you going to do to deal with
Section
this matter?
47, members of Parliament, including our caucus, must then consider this matter and put it on the table and then address it.
When are you going to put it on the table?
It's a question of parties engaging among themselves and talking about it and attending to it as soon as possible.
KwaZulu-Natal, were you betrayed by your own structures?
It was not a betrayal. It is a political outcome where in which the Zuma factor for some time in Natal has been there. And Zuma chose this moment knowing very well that in the body politic of KZN there is a void. Umntwana kaPhinda again passed away. And then the NFP is dead. And then is the IFP and the ANC, and the king is no more. So there's nobody in the presidency of national government who is looked upon by the constituency base of KZN as somebody they look up to at the present moment. We suffered the blows already when we did our assessment because Shembe Church spoke against us and we lost heavily. Many municipalities in KZN. This was the second one. And then the JZ factor was a problem. The July riots and the Zuma arrest was a factor in relation to those elections. As much as there were elections that were declared and run within a short space of time, the Zuma factor has always been with us. And when Zuma now decided to take our paraphernalia and our trademark and formed a party and say, I'm a double ANC member, like a double agent, don't ask me. I'm Zuma, I'm rescuing the ANC. It further polarized party members and supporters. In 2004, we registered 2/3 majority with KZN giving us between 47, 49. I don't know if we crunched the numbers. And then we got 1 million people who voted for us when Thabo Mbeki got 2/3 majority as our president.
It was 1.4 million votes.
Exactly. And then we increased when Jacob Zuma came in 2009 to
2.3 million votes.
2.3 million votes voted for us, and we got 65%. When in other provinces we dropped, KZN cushioned us. JZ became the president for the first time. An election following that, we got 62%. We performed badly in all provinces. KZN cushioned us with more than 2 million again, consistent. And now with the void that is there in KZN and all the factors I've related to you, it's not a shock. You don't have to blame it on other people. JZ, Umkhonto Wesizwe Party got support even where he did not campaign. And majority of the numbers, 2 million, came from KZN. He took some in Gauteng, in the hostels, Soweto and Alexander, and then in the eastern part of Mpumalanga, he took Umkhonto region. He became, I think, the opposition party in Mpumalanga. So that tells you a story about Jacob Zuma factor. And that is why we knew from the onset that it spells a disaster for the movement. So we never looked at the IFP in KZN as a threat. We knew that the possibility that will drop is there. And then because JZ came late, we knew that he will get the numbers. There was no doubt about it, but not to the level of 2 million numbers that he got. But nonetheless, it's not a shock because those numbers were with us when JZ was on our side.
Thank you very much, the Secretary General of the ANC. Last question in 1 second. Did you ever think of walking away from the GNU negotiations when it got hot in the kitchen?
No, we hold a strategic initiative. You can't move away from that. We didn't negotiate with the cap in the hand. We knew that we are not just a magnet, but we are the majority party, and we should be allowed to lead. If they don't want the arrangement of the GNU or multi-party engagement, then they can walk away and then we can go back to the bush.
Thank you.
And fight it out.
Thank you very much. That is the Secretary General of the ANC, Mr. Fikile Mbalula, essentially saying that they at no point felt like walking away from the GNU. They did not want to be boxed in one particular arrangement with the economic freedom fighters, which is largely unpredictable when it comes to coalition arrangements. The Democratic Alliance being a case, an example where they voted with the DA, didn't vote with the DA. You go to the IFP as well, decided to take out the IFP within municipalities in KwaZulu-Natal, in essence saying that they wanted to go for a broader government of national unity, and that the JZ factor was one of the reasons they were hammered at the polls and are under 50%.